So Renata, if we can ask you to step in and do the introductions.
I will. Thank you very much. It's a real honor. We have 3 panelists for this part. Dr. Sabine Little is Senior Lecturer in Languages Education at the University of Sheffield. Her research focuses on the intersection of language, identity, and well-being, working holistically with children, families, and schools. She convenes the Literacy and Multilingualism Special Interest Group for the UK Literacy Association. Sorry about my camera, it's on right now. And she co-convenes the European Educational Research Association's Network number 31, Languages and Education. Gina Domeniconi studied German literature and philosophy and worked in public and university libraries at the same time. Since 2015, she has been working at the Swiss Institute for Children's and Youth Media in the area of literacy promotion. She leads the project Schenk mir eine Geschichte, Family Literacy, or Tell Me a Story, Family Literacy, with a focus on first language promotion, in the context of which she trains migrants to become reading promoters, among other things. She's also in charge of the multilingual verse database Rhythm and Rhymes. Amina Marix-Evans has spent her whole life with books, working in the library of the Institute of Race Relations, bookshops in Sydney and London, publishing companies in the Netherlands, and spending 35 years as a freelance foreign rights agent, during which time she also worked as a freelance editor and translator. When she realized how many people did not have easy access to books, while some publishers were pulping books by the skipload, the idea for borderline books was born. The embryo of the project took shape in the early hours of 11 September 2021, after a brainstorming session with Jacques van Rijn, who facilitated the setting up of the project in Leiden. In 2007, she brought the project to the UK, where it has flourished. She started the Multilingual Library in Eldon Garden, Newcastle, in the summer of 2015. After becoming the first library of sanctuary in the Northeast, the landlords took the space back in 2021, and it is still awaiting new premises. Now, the title of our panel is Multilingual Library Projects. And without further ado, I think we are going to start asking our questions. Now, these are the questions that we will ask. And practically speaking, I would like to ask you to keep your answers rather short, because I know that we can answer one question at length, but then we don't get to move on to all of those very nice and important questions. So the first question, and I think the order of people answering, it's up to you. You can just jump in. We can keep the same order, or it can be very organic, just as we like. The first question that I would like everybody to answer is, what is your connection with heritage language education? Please tell us what you are most proud of in your work in connection with multilingual libraries. And if nobody is jumping in, I would like to ask Sabine to start, please.
Thank you. Okay, my connection with heritage language education is that all my research is focused on heritage languages. I support the heritage language schools in Sheffield. There's about between 20 and 25 of them. You'll all know that they sometimes come and go, and COVID had a bit of an impact as well. And what we did in collaboration was to start a multilingual children's library that is embedded in Sheffield's main children's library. So we had to work to argue for space, and we organised book drives similar to the things that Jana was discussing in the workshop. We ran multilingual readathons, and essentially the work surrounded giving multilingual families the right to claim space in what was previously a predominantly monolingual space, and to then look into what impact that had in terms of identity and belonging of the children of these families, of feeling that their language had a home, it impacted on their motivation to engage with the heritage language because they could see it being valued in a public space. That's my short answer, sorry.
Thank you so much. Gina, how about you?
So as you explained, I'm working with language facilitators who do the storytelling events in libraries, but also in community centers. And so the multilingual libraries are very important partners for us to provide the books in the languages the facilitators work in. So we have at the moment, we have around 150 facilitators who work in 20 languages. So yes, the libraries who provide these books are very important. And the thing when I'm talking about my work, I'm most proud of is that we in these last years we really achieved that also, let's say, normal community libraries are having sections with multilingual books or books in different languages or the traduced books and so on. So it is a process in the last years that so-called specialized intercultural libraries got integrated into the normal community library. So that's a thing that is happening since like 5 years or so, and which is a very, very pleasant thing to see.
Thank you so much. And Amina, how about you? What is your connection with the heritage language education, and what are you most proud of?
We don't directly do any language teaching, but we provide space for teachers to come and use a space for their, like we've got a French teacher who does different levels of teaching. It varies. Somebody will come in and say, can I do an Italian class? And they do that, and then it lasts a few weeks and falls apart. There's been a Japanese group meeting every fortnight. It's basically that we provide the space, and whoever wants to do teaching, they do it. We did have, when we were still in Newcastle, that the last period that there was some Arabic speaking parents who did quite a big classes on Sundays for different age groups. So we've been packed up for 18 months, so I don't know how it's going to develop in future, but we'll probably start with the same pattern and wait for people to want to use the space and just see how it develops, I think.
Well, I think this is a very precious use of the library, because I know that many heritage language schools struggle to pay for spaces for their teaching. So knowing that they can find shelter in a library, that's a fantastic thing. But let me move to the next question, keeping in mind that there is a variety of people in the audience here, parents, teachers, school managers, umbrella organizations. How can we best promote reading in heritage languages? And how can children and youth be motivated to make use of resources available? And I know we have already heard some answers, but let's elaborate. How can we best promote reading, and how can we motivate the children and youth?
We're all so shy and polite. I think go on. Do you want to? Oh, I'm an echo somewhere, I think.
Yeah. Okay. I think the best way, from my experience, to encourage children to read is to offer them books in subjects which they like. For example, when I was teaching, the boys like the sport, most of them. I know it's a stereotype thing, but when I give them things about sport that encourage them, and I tried it with my own children and it worked. So you give them something which they like, usually in the target language, they will try to read it.
Thank you so much for that contribution. And I forgot to say that the people who are listening to the panel discussion, you can also contribute. Would you please write your ideas in the chat? I will be reading them. And if we have time at the end, we can also get back to those. But I would really like to focus on our 3 panelists during this session. But I think you can actually just pick up there, Sabine, because that was a great point.
Yes, absolutely. And I think because my work is very much linked to the sense of identity and belonging, when I work with families, with schools, with librarians, with teachers, it is definitely about picking the child up where they are. And I will shamelessly plug an activity that I'm going to put in the chat. If you've not come across the idea of a river of reading, it is a beautiful, beautiful exercise where children are asked to engage with their parents and consider their reading journeys. And one of my research projects was to find out that actually multilingual children have got much, much richer rivers of reading than monolingual children do, and they have many more reasons for considering certain books or resources important to them. And it's a fantastic resource for teachers to engage families, because you can't do a river of reading without parental input. And it's a wonderful resource for children to understand just how much reading they've probably done. I've not yet met a child who hasn't said, oh, actually, I've read more than I thought. And it builds up their strength and confidence to then take it from there. So it becomes a wonderful discussion point. So shameless plug there.
You?
Maybe I can say we too, we are targeting the parents actually. So targeting the families to come to the library, to the storytelling session, and to engage in a session where they can connect with others who speak the same language, and to tell them how important it is to speak in the language of your heart, and to have a group who really is cultivating that. And so that is also one part of this. Of the libraries who are getting books in different languages, they sometimes are a bit disappointed that the people don't lend them, and that the numbers aren't that high, and that the people are not coming who are speaking Somali or Arabic or so on. So I think the language facilitators are extremely important to get those families to the library that probably didn't know that the books are there, and who are probably even not used to going to libraries because in their minds it's not a place where they can have just some free times with their kids and be there on a rainy afternoon. So I think to have people who can explain and can show what it is that the families and the kids get in a library with books in all languages is very important for the goal of reading promotion.
I think parents are key people in this whole adventure of reading. What do you think, Amina?
Well, we've always encouraged parents to come in and read to their children in the library. And where we're moving is a former pub, so there's a lot of seating benches, and we're trying to see where we want to take it out and leave room for bookshelves, and where we want to leave it in to leave space for parents and people to sit and read together. We also had, and will encourage again, reading sessions where, you know, this week it's Polish on Saturday, and next week it'll be Slovak, and but to a large extent what we do is shaped by who comes to the library and what they want to do. It's very much a community effort. And if somebody comes up with a good idea and, oh, I can do this, and shall we do a little bit of a play? I'd love to see people writing plays. I always wanted to do one where a child says, I want some bread, and somebody else says, what's that? No, that is pain. Pain? What is that? Nay, that is broad. Where they argue about the same thing, only they don't realize everybody's talking about bread, but all in their own language, and just silly things, but things that could introduce people to simple words in different languages. And I would like to, I'll shamelessly plug our website as well, because I have to add this Rivers of Reading to our links page. But on our link page, we've got loads about different libraries, virtual libraries, physical libraries, apps for learning languages and all sorts. So I'll put that in the chat in a minute.
Thank you so much, and we will share all of it. And this conference Padlet is going to live on, so we all can always go back and check the links. I wanted to say that the roles of libraries have changed a lot in recent years. They are not only storage places for books, but they are social spaces, and they offer all kinds of services, and they try to attract all kinds of people to come in. So your vision, Amina, that's really beautiful. A place for discussions about language, about culture, because bread, for example, is a really cultural thing, right? Bread in different countries means different things. But let's move on to the next question. How can migrant communities deal with the logistical issue of accessing books in their language? Now we are talking about logistical issue, and we know from Paul Frank's talk yesterday that a few languages exist in tons and tons and tons of books, and most of the world's languages are either not written or they're very inaccessible in print. So how about the logistical issue when you're a migrant community in any country? How can we best access books in our languages? For example, if we are parents or school librarians.
I want to say come to our library, but I mean, we have got, what did I say, 120? It was 107, and then we got a big delivery from Macmillan of the Gruffalo in, I think it was 10 Dutch dialects and Orkney Scottish and Jersey French and a lot. So probably we're up to 120. But yes, I mean, the Aboriginal languages are rare as hen's teeth, as they say in Australia. What can you do about that?
I think that the difficulties are very much dependent on the language community, and it's very difficult to have one single answer. In the previous session, we talked about initiatives like encouraging people to buy a book while they're on holiday and bringing it back, and to slowly stock up that way. And like Amina, our multilingual library relied much on donations from publishers, which meant that it was heavily skewed towards Western European, traditionally Western European, and acknowledging problematics around French in there, for example, and where else those languages are spoken. But I think, I mean, I've worked with communities where they had to write the books. There was just no other way to actually get hold of them. So you just have to skew the way you explain it to children. You know, we're going to do a service to literature. There aren't many books. We're going to write some more, and you package that around their. Again, I work with identity and belonging, so talking to them about keeping the language alive, helping younger siblings, for example, and try and gather motivation and identification with the language through that process of production and co-production. And again, there's lovely intergenerational work that can be done. So we've done workshops where parents tell a traditional story and the children choose to adapt them to modern life. So to give them a spin that applies to how they culturally view the world. And that has worked really, really well.
Well, I just wanted to say in Iceland, for example, most of the people live in Reykjavik, like 2/3 of people live around the capital city. And then you have all those areas away from the capital city that are full of immigrant communities. But their access to our physical library is just through the mailing services, or they have to drive like several hundreds of kilometers, which is not easy. Always. So there's always a combination of ways, right? There's the physical space, which is wonderful. And there's the online books. We've been discussing online libraries quite a lot. And also creation of own literature. And I think that rhymes so beautifully with, yes, with the culture and identity and belonging. Gina, did you want to add something to this one?
Just add that many of the language facilitators and teachers I work with, they also do translations. So in the end, that's you get from some libraries, you also get the help to do the translations. But still, I mean, it's a profession in the end. So you have to have the money and the time to do that. But that can also be a way to get more books. I speak about languages where it's very difficult to get books, or when you, as we are working with children's and picture books, you just have countries that have no, let's say, production or tradition in doing picture books, where you can get maybe school books, but they are not as attractive for young children. So you really have to see how to work. And I am very happy for the trend of silent books, because there you can really put in any language you want. So that's a good, very good instrument for us too.
Yeah, silent books. I think I know exactly what you mean, even though I haven't heard that concept before. Thank you. But yeah, we have a collection, online, physical, creating, translating, and we also had some ideas yesterday how to separate maybe the ones who are professionally translated and the ones that we are creating with the children, so that it's clear that or there might have to be some editing process and supervision process before you publish books that are created and translated by children, for example, or good-willing individuals. What kind of activities can libraries with international collections organize to engage the immigrant communities? Now, we have already had a lot, but let's make a list. What activities can we organize to attract people to join our spaces?
I'll start with the one that was most fun. I mean, we've done multilingual storytelling and things, but the one that was most fun to organize was a multilingual readathon. So we challenged the local community and said, we're going to start reading. How many languages can we get through before we're going to have to stop? And it was such fun. We literally had people tapping me on the shoulder. Have you had Farsi yet? No. Okay, right. I'm queuing up. And that was amazing. I mean, obviously we advertised it in advance. So we had people primed. We had about 14 languages primed. And I think we got another 7 just on the day from people saying, I can do one. And that was such a wonderful community event. It was really fantastic. And I've since then run that in school as well, because it's not particularly threatening. You know, if a child has to read just a little picture book or just even a page, no, it's a great way to introduce people to the language that are going on in the community and give people the confidence to contribute to that as well, which again linked to belonging, to a sense of belonging. It took place in that space, everybody contributed, and it led to a greater enhanced sense of belonging to that space.
That's a beautiful idea that we can easily transfer to other communities and try it out in our libraries. Do you have any other examples of like something that really worked, something that you would like to recommend and share?
So what worked very good in the city I'm living is in Zurich is that when schools are doing some evening with the parents where they get some information about any organizational thing or so on, they just do it in the library. So because you have to meet somewhere, you just go to the library and there you go to the multilingual library, and every parent gets a library card, and so you just combine these two things. That is something very simple that worked very well. Also, I know one community who does the welcoming event for all the new people who moved to the city. They just do that in the library, so that's also a possibility, also in a multilingual library, to just take the opportunity to show people that it exists in the end.
Fantastic.
I have a question for both Sabine and Gina. Is how do you deal with reluctant parents who they're under so much pressure to learn here English because they've arrived from Iran or wherever, and the children are learning English at school? They probably speak Farsi in the kitchen, but they won't learn to read and write it. And the parents are saying, yes, but we've all got to learn English. And I kind of make a joke of it, saying, oh, we're missing a whole generation of translators. But also saying, how are they going to write to their grandma if they can't write in Farsi and she doesn't speak English? How do you get over that reluctance?
So as a researcher, I tend to have more time with families than some other people tend to have, but I do work around, I developed a framework which is linked around emotional and pragmatic attachments to the heritage language. So I try and work with families to help them understand that each family member has a different way to view the heritage language. And we talk about heritage, I talk at Great Aunt Edna's vows, although Edna's name might change to be culturally appropriate, and the idea that when we pass something on, then it's up to the recipient to do with that what they want. So we do a lot of work around talking about what it culturally means. But I wouldn't force either parents, or children to. I also do a lot of work at helping parents understand that their child might have a different view of their linguistic identity than the parents, and that pressuring them to automatically take over the same linguistic goals will potentially backfire. Similarly, if the parents are of the opinion, then it helps. Sometimes it's just a case of making them understand, pragmatic considerations along the lines of better employment, or there'll be different things that work for different families.
So because sometimes the families also have a misconception on what is best for their kids. So we really have to argument that if they speak the language they speak best, they also give the best instruments to their kids. So sometimes it's not clear to parents what to do. So you have arguments on your side on yes, living with both languages and still doing a very good job if you speak your first or you cultivate the heritage language. So sometimes it really is also just giving some information that comforts parents also in that it's okay how they are doing, and that it's not that there's not a black and white answer to how to first learn English or to
I just like to step in here. Thank you for this, Gina, because I just wrote down a note that we just need to try to team up with other stakeholders as well. It's so important that the professionals in the schools, for example, are giving the message to the parents that based on research, based on the children's linguistic rights, based on policies, international, the rights on the Convention no, I'm saying it wrong, the Convention on the Rights of the Child. You know, there are so many reasons why children should be using and learning and enjoying their mother tongues. And so I think it's important that that we reach out, maybe the libraries, maybe the community organizations, reach out to teachers, and maybe teachers need professional development about this. So maybe universities can help a little bit. Maybe we need to talk with representatives of the cities and municipalities, because they are giving all kinds of messages about languages to parents and to the communities. So I think it's really important that there is this general discourse also, because the parents are under a lot of pressure. Like Amina was saying, you know, you come to this society, you have to learn the language of the society to give your children the possibility of good education and good future for yourself. You know, if you want a job, you rather learn the language of the society. So there are a lot of pressures, but we also need to counterbalance these arguments and kind of join forces. It's kind of lobbying or you know, spreading the news, or just having that public discourse about multilingualism. It really helps to promote the libraries. Yes.
Can I super quickly come back to, it ties in with this, your previous question on something that worked really well, because something that we did, I'll be really quick. I don't know how well it works in other countries, but in England, we have a summer reading scheme. It runs nationwide every year, where children get a little reading passport and they have to read 6 books. And we simply copied that, but made it the multilingual reading scheme. And when children had read 6 books in a language that was not English, they got a little certificate and a tiny medal. But I think it was the certificate that mattered. And what that did was it gave children an artifact that they could carry into school and say, I have been rewarded for being multilingual. And it made a huge difference to their sense of pride. Again, as a researcher, I coded all the responses, and you could see the emotions that they attached to it, but also the spread, how they took it to their friends, to their teachers, to their families. And just it's a tiny thing, and we can all print off a certificate on a printer, but it just gives them a physical artifact where they can showcase their multilingualism in different contexts.
Thank you. And that reminds me of another event that has been created and promoted here. It's called Intercultural Encounters Flying Carpet, and it's about presenting your personal culture in a school. It's that there is a whole research and philosophy behind that, but we are not putting children in boxes like, this is your language, this is your culture, you are from Bulgaria, you know, but they decide what they want to present. And often they would bring also books in their languages that they can read, and they would read, and they are very proud, and they get a lot of positive feedback, and that kind of empowers them. And so many of the schools around here organize these intercultural encounters, and there's a website that I'm going to put in the chat where you can read about it. And secondly, also, I've been really impressed with the global seal of biliteracy. Like, the children really need to know that they are learning the language not only to understand their grandmother back in Mongolia, whatever country it is, but they really need to know that their plurilingualism is appreciated, that it's valuable for them, for their future, for their social and academic and professional life, right? So, and there was also a question from Professor Kreshen, how do we get information about research and language development? And yes, we have the website, and we are all connected into all kinds of networks. So we of course love to follow with the trends and what's happening. Right. This is a really interesting discussion about how the libraries, the multilingual libraries, can serve. They have many roles, right? They have many functions. It's not only the reading, the print, but that it's becoming broader. Would you like to comment a little bit more on that? Or alternatively, I will proceed to another short questions. Under what circumstances Are digital texts appropriate? What are the pros and cons of digital versus printed texts? Maybe you would like to sum up from your point of view.
I think from my perspective, I think they are always appropriate. I think children should follow their interests. When I did my research, one girl was telling me how she was following people on Instagram, and that's where she did a lot of her reading, because she was interested in the life stories that these people were posting, and that's where she got a lot of her Polish from, and it fits in with her culture. She also read books, but it showed that Polish affected all parts of her life. And if she'd not been allowed, like my own son, so my son's growing up bilingual English-German, and at some point several years ago, he used a word that I didn't understand. And a word that I hadn't taught him. We live quite in isolation, so I kind of knew where his German was coming from, and suddenly there was a quite complicated word that I hadn't taught him. So I said, "Where's that from?" And it turned out that several weeks earlier he'd switched Pokemon to German, and there is a lot of reading in video games, and he had been happily playing in German and reading the texts in Pokemon for weeks and weeks, and suddenly came out with completely new vocabulary. So I'm not a snob. I think the reading comes wherever it comes from.
Thank you.
I tend to remain on the fence because a lot of our library users don't have computers and may have very limited access to phones that they mostly need to talk to their lawyers and keep in touch with family, and not used for playing around too much. So, but I am thinking, after learning about the library yesterday, Bloom Library, we need to have a few places in our library where people can use computers to access. That would be nice, especially for languages we don't have. I mean, we had one book in now I've forgotten the name of it, Tigrinya, and there was a young man who used to come in and read. It was a poetry book, and he would come in and he would read it, and then every week he would come and stroke it, and he'd bring a friend in and say, "Look, they have a book in our language." And we weren't going to lend it because it was the only book we had in Tigrinya. And one week he came and, "Where's my book? Where's my book?" I said, "It's on display in the window." He was like, "Oh, thank goodness. I thought you'd gone and lent it to somebody else when you said I couldn't borrow it." But just the joy it gave him that he existed. It's like Sabine said, recognition and showing you've got a place, you belong there as well, is so important. And also, I've told the police for our new place that we need their protection and we don't want them snooping. I said, we have never, ever asked anyone whether they have the right papers or not. There was one man signed up and we knew he was a refugee because he'd come from a language teaching, a conversation group. And then he says, "Do you need to see my ID?" I said, "No, it's on the front of your head." And he was just so relieved that literally being taken at face value, you know, we don't need bits of paper to prove you exist. You're standing there. And so anyway, the police better behave themselves, because seriously.
It's a beautiful answer, because I really think that we have this kind of European northern view that everybody has access to internet and technology, and every kid has a smartphone with access to internet, and it's definitely not the case. So having in mind those small languages and communities in countries that are not so rich as to provide tablets to children in the schools, that's definitely, the paper will keep its value, I think. But also I was thinking, as you were speaking, that our paper libraries could even have computers that would provide access to the online books, right? If you want to provide a space for reading and the family doesn't have a computer, that they could possibly sit at a computer in the library, open Bloom Library, for example, and read in their language. So the technology can help in that sense. Gina, did you want to comment on this one about the digital versus paper?
Yes, I also think that for some languages it can be very handy to have access, at least in some way, to books in that language. But also I have a similar story that I have one Somali language facilitator had some families, and she only has, because it's very difficult to get Somali books. So, but she had one book. It was like a picture book where you just have the vocabulary, not very attractive, but still. And the families who go to her storytelling were so happy that they really every week another family got the book to take it home. So it really is something different when you can hold it in your hands, and yes, you have it here and in present, and you can look through it, and not only have it on a screen where it's nothing special to read your language on a screen, but it's something special when you read it in a book. It makes a difference in the end.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Nothing will come instead of that feeling, like leafing the pages and sitting in a comfortable sofa, right? And that brings us to the final question. What is your vision for multilingual libraries? What's your dream?
More of them. I mean, I do a lot of work with schools, and just there has definitely been a shift over the last few years over how willing schools are to engage with the idea of having a multilingual library within the school. So again, it's about space, it's about identity, it's about having the children's languages represented in that space. So I'm confident. Now, this is I think the third conference in 2 years that I've been to that was specifically linked to multilingual libraries and multilingual reading, all that had a specific strand on it. And after years of feeling that a lot of work took place in isolation, it's just wonderful to see these networks grow and the connections. So I'm hopeful.
Thank you. That's a beautiful answer. More of them. How about you, ladies?
I have a mad dream. I would take over some huge museum, and you walk in and you're suddenly at the North Pole or somewhere, and that you become part of a film where the Inuit are driving their dog sleds along, but you can hear them speaking and you hear the language, and you would be able to access books or see how it's written, and you could just literally go all around the world seeing the language in its context. And yeah, it would cost millions and be great fun. But it would include culture and people and climate and the whole caboodle. A miniature planet. I'm ambitious, right? But it's, I mean, even language is so much more than just language and books. It's got to do with food and music and dance and everything else. So I always try and jam everything in if I can. That's me.
Thank you. So you have the last word, Gina.
So, I mean, my vision is that every library is a multilingual library. So, I mean, as most people in the world do speak more than one language, it should be actually normal. So, I guess it's not, yeah, that would be the vision I have.
Well, that's beautiful, beautiful final words. And I cannot stop myself from saying technology is advancing and we have virtual realities. Yeah, I just saw some presentation from Finland where they were presenting virtual classroom where you can actually just like touch screen and you are you know, experiencing a space around you. So Amina, your idea isn't so far into the future. And I definitely agree both with Sabine and with Gina that that this should be normal, because multilingualism is normal, plurilingualism of people is normal. So that shouldn't be something that we have to struggle for. It should be around us, all these books and access. But with these words, thank you so much for participating in this panel discussion. It was a great discussion, and I'm happy we were good with the time so we could go through all of our questions.